Hello, this is David Godfrey. This essay will explore the ways in which one stone can kill two birds, namely poverty and depression. I propose that many cases of clinical and subclinical depression can be alleviated by angry political action for reasons explained below. In order to have a salubrious or curative effect, the activism must be expressed with bellicosity and rage. Now, first off, depression has been rising. Many sources throughout the media have made this abundantly clear. Furthermore, the consumption of psychotropic medications to combat depression has become more and more prevalent. Nevertheless, the suicide rate is rising. Now, years ago, psychoanalysts tried to discern and uncover the underlying emotional causes of an emotional malady. Starting in the 70s, that really began to fall out of favor. Therefore, doctors fabricated new doctrines. In large measure, these new explanations posited biochemical and/or genetic causes for emotional deviations and recommended that drugs be administered. Now, of course, I fully accept that some emotional deviations can be caused by one's abnormal biological constitution, but it is the height of illogic to assume that all emotional quirks have a biological cause or etiology. Years ago, many doctors had theories regarding the cause of depression, but somehow psychiatry has forgotten what it once knew as thoroughly as Stalin decreed that the Soviet Union should forget the legacy of Leon Trotsky. Years ago, doctors held that depression was caused by rage turned inwards against oneself. A person may have been hurt. That person did not have the resources to rectify or avenge his loss, and that person, unable to strike out against his oppressor, strikes out against himself, plunging into a depression. I first became acquainted with this theory in Fritz Perls' book entitled Ego, Hunger, and Aggression. Other doctors are in accord and hold that depression strikes when a defeated person, unable to combat his assailant, turns his misery inwards. Now, as depression has been rising, something else has been going on. Income inequality has been soaring. Since Reagan ascended to the throne, we have been hurtling back in time to the days of Charles Dickens. Most of the time, the media understates the problem, as the Clintonite neoliberalism of so much of the so-called progressive elite is corporatist and corrupt to the core. I know brilliant, hard-working people who are not having children because they cannot afford them. I know brilliant, hard-working people who live on the 5th floor of rodent-infested walk-up apartments, which are no bigger than glorified prison cells, which rent for close to $3,000 $100,000 a month. I know college graduates who are neither drug users nor psychotics, but are college graduates who live in dangerous, disgusting New York City homeless shelters. I believe that the growing pauperization of the American people is the cause of growing depression. And I know that most of the liberal opposition, with the exception of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, is part of the problem. I propose a solution: direct, furious, mass action to change the distribution of power and dollars. This may achieve two results. It may put more money in your pocket, and it may ease depression. Depressed people will no longer sink into paralytic depressions. Depressed people will not turn their anger inward, taking it out on themselves. Instead, they will inflict their anger on the culpable parties, on the realtors and the bosses and the drug companies that have been massacring and making mincemeat of their lives. I propose that we stop acting like frightened, mousy members of what Nixon and Trump called the silent majority and start acting like, perhaps, the French. For example, in 1968, France went on strike and wages went up by 20%. There are many other examples of European socialism, but this is not the time and place for a history of the European left. I envision and propose the following. Do you have a rotten landlord? In New York, so many of them are Donald Trump wannabes, sneering, strutting, deceiving, thieves who deserve all the wrath we can amass. If you have a rotten landlord, have a rent strike. If the great majority of tenants in a building all decline to pay the rent, the landlord might find it hard to evict all of them. Take a page out of American history. Arthur Schlesinger noted that in the Great Depression in Iowa, when a judge ruled that a bank was entitled to evict a farmer, the farmers in the courtroom seized the judge. They kidnapped him. They drove him miles away from town, stripped him naked and tarred and feathered him. Don't you think the likes of Donald Trump deserve that humiliation? Don't you think they should be badgered, beaten, and terrified into abject, squirming submission? Don't you think workers should take matters into their own hands instead of waiting for a lily-livered Congress to do anything? In the 30s, the workers took over an auto plant in the course of a strike. Perhaps office workers of today should take over the office space of the firms that enslaved them and bring all work to a halt. Of course, if only a few people do this, that saintly few will be savaged by the lying law. But if thousands of people do it, we can instill crippling, all-consuming fear into the miserly, malignant hearts of the scoundrels of Great Neck, of Scarsdale, of Grosse Point, and of all the other citadels of undeserving, wanton, wicked wealth. Thank you. This has been David Gottfried. Goodbye.